Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Sharon Bossler.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad I nabbed you and Phyllis to do this.
And-
Again, someone from Las Vegas, Henderson.
Someone out in Henderson, but you know, I've been on a lot of blocks before I got to Henderson.
That's right. So we're anxious, or excited to hear about
Shall we
these.
take a journey down
Yeah.
around the
We're-
blocks?
We're going to take a journey, and as we heard the other day at preaching on Sunday, that there are many stories that have many winding roads and detours. So I think we could just look at you, and I think that's going to be part of your story.
All
So,
right,
anyway,
very
thank you.
good.
But let's start where the road is straight, or whatever. Your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and your parents, your siblings,
All right.
schooling?
All right. Well, I grew up, I was born at Highland Park General Hospital. My father worked at Chrysler's in Highland Park. So I lived in the Detroit area. We belonged to St. Rita's Parish, which was
East side?
over near the State Fair.
Yeah, kind of in between.
Yeah.
8 Mile. Yeah.
Off of 7 Mile we lived. And it was an SSJ parish, but I didn't go to Catholic school because
Now,
I was
tell us what SSJ is.
Sisters of St. Joseph. So-
The reason I do that, congregation families are watching this, our co-workers, and YouTube.
Absolutely,
Right, so-
absolutely. So explain yourself.
Yeah.
So, but I went to public school because I was a baby boomer, and the Catholic school was all filled up.
Oh, right.
So then when I was in 5th grade, my father got transferred and we moved down river, down along the Detroit River there to Wyandotte. And my father was working in Trenton. So I had the opportunity to go to Catholic school for the first time in 5th grade.
Oh, interesting.
And the parish that we belonged to was another Sisters of St. Joseph parish. When I finished in grade school, I went to high school, Sisters of St. Joseph High School, St.
What was that?
Francis
Okay.
Xavier in Ecorse.
Mm-hmm.
And when I graduated from high school, you know, in 5th grade, I loved the sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I loved being in Catholic school. So, of course, I wanted to be a sister.
Mm-hmm. Was there one sister in particular, maybe, that?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
I just really admired the sisters. Probably the young first grade sister who I used to wash her blackboards
Right,
after
right.
school. But so I entered the Sisters of St. Joseph in 1961 when I graduated from high school.
And now their mother house is in?
Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Okay.
And I was there from 1961 to 1967
61 to 67.
through the Vatican Council.
Okay. Now, a little bit back with your family. Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, my sister would not forgive me if I left her out.
Because she's going to
So
look at this.
I had an older brother, Dennis, who is deceased now a couple of years. And after I was the middle child, and I had twin sisters, Jean and Joan. Jean was very sick. She had cystic fibrosis.
Oh.
She died the day before her 3rd birthday. I was 6 years old.
Wow.
It was the first time I saw adults cry.
Wow.
That's a strong memory.
Mm-hmm.
So my sister, brother and sister grew up with.
How did that affect you kids, those of you that were left?
You know, it was, you know, I've talked about it since.
Yeah.
What that, because I never went back and thought about it until I
right.
was a little bit older, and I was talking to someone in spiritual direction, and we began to unpack that and what that situation, how that marked me, because I remember my grandmother saying to me, "You have to be a big girl now and help
Got it.
your mommy."
Mm-hmm.
So I took that on.
That's right.
I was the helper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your folks probably didn't want to show the grief either.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Well, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
So,
So anyway, back there, you entered the convent in Kalamazoo, the Sisters of St. Joseph, and you were there for about 6 years?
6 years through the Vatican II changes.
Okay.
And it was the best of times and the worst of times for someone in formation. So I decided not to make final vows. I left, but I taught in their schools for many years.
Well, that was very healthy.
And it was in the days,
yeah.
and it was the days of teacher shortage. So I, as soon as it was out that I was leaving, I was offered a job.
Mm-hmm.
And
what is it that was going on that you decided to leave?
I would say I was missioned to St. Veronica's in East Detroit.
Right,
it was a
right.
big community, 23 sisters. And I remember that the thing that bothered me the most was it was Christmas, and all the young people. Of course, you could come and go a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger people in the community left on Christmas Day, and the old sisters were left alone in the convent. And it just, I thought, something's not right here. You know, and there was no discussion about it.
Mm-hmm.
So people were, you know, lots of experimenting was going on.
Right, right.
So I think that was the thing that really touched me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Had you made final vows?
No.
You didn't? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So then I went on to teach for 20 years.
Where did you live?
I went back to Wyandotte.
With your family?
No.
Oh,
No, I lived with somebody else who was leaving.
okay, okay.
So, excuse me. So I lived, I taught in Wyandotte for a number of years. Now, my burning question, the first year I was sent out to teach was, you know, I had my 3 reading groups and my 3 phonics groups, and I thought, why are these kids having trouble learning to read? They're as intelligent as the others.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was teaching in Wyandotte, there was a new association called the Down River Learning Disabilities Center, and they were recruiting teachers who were interested in learning. So I had an opportunity to attend these classes.
Wonderful.
And so that, as I taught, that was always my, what can I do? And so later on, I moved out to Royal Oak and taught at St. Denis School because they had a non-graded primary.
Okay.
And I wanted to see what could we do to help the kids. And then I had an opportunity to work in an after-school program, on Saturday program, for kids and adults having problems learning to read.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my thrust. And then I happened to attend a workshop given by the Montessorians. And I thought they knew something that I didn't know. And I was very impressed. So I went and took the Montessori training. And then I took the preschool training. Then I went to Columbus, Ohio, and took the elementary training. And
you were on your own at that time.
I was on my
yeah.
own.
Mm-hmm.
I helped some friends open their own Montessori school.
Oh.
They asked me to come after we did the preschool. They did the preschool. They wanted an elementary classroom. Would you come and open it? And I did. And it was right down the street from the monastery of the Blessed Sacrament, the Dominican nuns in Farmington Hills.
Farmington Hill, okay.
And so the Feast of All Saints was coming. I wanted to go to Mass, and I used to see cars when I drove past there. So I called them up and said, "Do you have a public Mass?" They said yes. So I went. That's all I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it touched me deeply. They were singing the office, and I always loved the Psalms and the praying of the Psalms.
And you didn't see the sisters because they were behind.
No, but I saw the extern sisters.
The extern,
yes,
that
yes,
was the word.
yes.
Now, an extern sister in the cloister, what does that mean?
She meets the public.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So I ended up knocking on the door
And?
and entering in 1984. I had taught for 20 years. I entered the monastery.
What is it was happening within you, or what were you looking for?
I was
or
in
what-
my early 40s. I look back now and it's that natural turn inward.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you've
Midlife,
done the
uh-huh.
career, you've
Right.
done okay. But there's a part of me that has always loved the contemplative, the silence, and so I was drawn to that.
You never heard of the cloister before that, or never entered your
Never entered my
uh-huh,
consciousness.
consciousness, uh-huh.
Yes,
Mhm. So you went through the formation program there, and
was there for 22 years.
22 years.
12 of those years I was the novice mistress,
Oh my!
formation director.
And you never went out to do any education,
No,
any theology update. You
No.
didn't have classes.
no, but I had theology in the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Okay.
So I did have a theological and scriptures.
Yeah, yeah. So did you have a big novice group?
Yeah, we had quite a few. And I had some interesting experiences there because the Dominicans in Kentucky had sponsored a young Vietnamese Dominican to come, and her bishop sent her over to study and get an education. Anyway, she was back visiting, and there are, I think, 5 or 6 Dominican congregations in Vietnam, and she wanted to start a monastery. There was a whole group in Vietnam that wanted to start a monastery, and somebody told her about our community, and she came to visit and talk to us, and Prioress sent me over to talk to her, and we gave her a copy of our constitutions and said, we would be glad to help any way we can. Well, then we said, Vietnam is still a communist country, so we couldn't go in to do something there. But we said, if you want to send somebody.
Oh.
So we did, during those 12 years, we had 5 sisters
Oh, really?
from Vietnam
Uh-huh.
come. And then I had the opportunity, along with the prioress, to go accompany one of them, one of the last ones, to be back to Vietnam. And we had meetings with the friars and the sisters there, would they support this new venture?
Mm-hmm.
And so they now have a monastery in
Wow.
Vietnam. So it was a wonderful opportunity.
Yes,
and
I'll say.
So we had those sisters from Vietnam. We had a sister from the Cameroons come from the monastery. There were difficulties there. It was a young community, and the order, the friars, asked if we would take her because they felt she had a vocation, and one from Nigeria. So there's a lot of...
So they came there and they stayed there. except Vietnam.
The Vietnam went back, and I think the one in Nigeria wants to go back. And she had been in a group. A Dominican bishop had tried to start a group, but it didn't work. And so I think she's going to go back. And
So you were novice director, novice mistress?
it was when I look back now, teaching classes to all of these people from all of these different settings, and of course Americans who had come in.
How did they know English, or did they know English?
They knew some, and I was able to. We called over to Orchard Lake, and we called over to Madonna. We were looking for someone who could come and teach English as a second language. So I had somebody come in, and in the beginning I sat and watched what she did.
Being a good teacher, and
yes.
teaching reading and working with
Right,
primary, working with Montessori.
I had the background.
You just transfer your skills. So then all of a sudden, you went in a different direction.
Well, and,
after how many years in the cloister?
22.
22.
I was there 22.
Okay.
So how did I meet the Adrians? Well, first of all, Eileen Patrick
Yes, our dear sister
was
Eileen
there
Patrick.
when I entered. And we also had a sister who had a cousin. I don't remember the name here. So we used to get all of your literature. I remember reading Nadine's letters sometimes. We would get
Because of Eileen Patrick.
Yes, because of her. And and the sisters also talked about the Adrians when the monastery was in Detroit. The Adrians used to come on Sundays when they had benediction and pray the rosary and be there for benedictions, the Adrians that lived in the area.
Yeah.
So there's a long connection.
And then Phyllis was there during your time.
I was Phyllis's novice mistress.
What was going on that you made the decision or discerned the fact to leave the monastery?
I think that, I've questions, that question that I started with when I first started teaching. There were questions that I had about a friend of mine who had been in the monastery and left. She was reading, what is it called? The Tao of Physics. And she was reading this stuff about science, and she got me interested. And I really had a lot of questions and did not have things available.
Or even conversation with the others?
No one to talk about it with it. And so I just came to the realization that I had gifts that I wanted to use, and I had questions that I wanted to find the answers to.
In the structure of the cloister, there's no way that change, or no way that you could have discussion groups, or you'd have to have books, you'd have to have more...
I had read all the books in the library in the monastery that I was interested in.
Were they up to date? I mean,
yes, but they were not,
it was before
I asked the librarian to get me something on science, and the librarian sent Margaret Wheatley's Leadership in, what is it? Leadership in the New Science?
Something like that.
Well, I started reading this. And then I realized there was a whole other world out there that was passing me by that I wanted to.
And not the world as it was when you entered 20-some years ago.
Right.
You never had television, radio,
no
newspapers?
No.
You didn't know what was going on in the world?
Well,
How did you pray for everything?
Well, we knew what was going on in the world.
Okay.
I mean, because as soon as something went on, people called the monastery and asked the sisters to pray. So things went up on the outside the bulletin board, right outside a chapel. There was, and we had the news strip from the Wall Street Journal put up every day, but you didn't know in detail what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then you approach your superiors and tell them that you feel.
Well, I asked first, and because I had been doing this, and sometimes if sisters needed, especially sisters in leadership, could make a retreat someplace. Well, I asked to make a retreat at the Dominican ashram.
Here?
Which was here.
Right. At Radisson.
I knew Don Gergen.
Oh. Okay.
We knew Don Gergen.
Yeah.
And so I did. I went and made a 12-day retreat there. And then I came back. And I remember I was working out in the garden one day, doing a little gardening in my free time, and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And so I wanted to be in spiritual direction. So I said to Phyllis, do you know somebody? And Phyllis recommended Carol Ioannis.
Oh, wow.
So Carol Ioannis walked with me. Never, at that point, I just needed to talk to somebody out of the monastery.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Adrian Dominicans hosted the retreat in 2006 for for all of the Dominican nuns. I was here for that.
Now the Dominican nuns, that means they're cloistered, all the cloisters.
All the Dominican cloistered nuns. I think there were about 86 of us that made the retreat.
These people had not been out of their own monasteries or anything. I remember someone saying, I wasn't at Weber at the time, but they alerted people on campus, the co-workers and stuff, that the sisters from the cloister were coming. So, they tried to explain the cloister, and they'd be quiet, the sisters would be quiet, and all this kind of stuff. Well, they were rip-roaring, having a good time.
The sisters were quiet somewhat, but this was a whole wonderful experience for them.
And the Master General of the Order.
Of the Order came and did the retreat.
How wonderful.
Yes. So, so I had those, contests. And the other thing is, we had a couple of sisters with dementia who we were having a hard time taking care of in the monastery. And so the prioress had called and talked to Pat Walter. And so you took care of two of our sisters. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the sisters would come maybe once a month and visit with them. And so I had a chance to come and see our sisters here. Right. And so there have been connections over the years.
So then you left?
So then I took a leave of absence.
From the monastery?
From the monastery.
You just...
No, I took a leave of absence for 3 months. And I went to Delaware for a few months. There was a group of sisters who were trying to start a monastery that was less cloistered but more contemplative. So I said, well, I'll check out and see what they're doing. Well, that was more of the same. And I thought, no. And so I came back to the ashram for the last 2 months. And Phyllis came and picked me up. And I said to Phyllis, of course I was in the habit, and I said, I think I need to stop. We need to stop, and I need to buy a pair of slacks. So we did. And then when I got here, of course, they took me to what you now call Catherine's closet, and I got a few clothes to wear while I was on campus because I just wanted to see how that felt.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of that, I went back to the monastery. I prayed. I continued with.
Was Phyllis out by that time?
Yes.
Okay.
So I continued to pray and continued with Carol in direction. And then one day I talked to Carol about it. I said, you know, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think it's possible? Could I transfer? So I called up Donna Markham, made an appointment, came out, talked to her, and the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Here I am. And so I actually transferred in January of 2009.
Right. I remember the day you were at St. Catherine Chapel.
Yes.
Yes, and you were welcomed.
With Emmy.
Emmy.
Emmy Chobe and I
Yeah.
entered. We're a crowd of 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at least you have a crowd.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, and I had I was already formed as a Dominican. I had formed Dominicans, but I needed to learn the constitutions and the culture of the Adrian Dominicans.
Mm-hmm.
And so Emmy and I had the great honor of having Nadine teach us the constitutions.
Wonderful.
So it was very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, you know, I've been out of the picture for quite a while. How am I going to get a ministry? And I was reached out to by Bob Doherty
Okay.
at
in
St.
Chicago now,
Leonard's.
yeah.
At St. Leonard's, that there was an opening. Was I interested? So I went and stayed with Kathy and Grace
Okay.
Doherty and interviewed and was hired by Bob as the director of volunteers at St. Leonard's and spent 8 years there.
So you left the monastery. You didn't have another ministry because you were in
No.
somewhat of a formation program.
That's right.
With us. So then Bob heard about you in Chicago and had you come there.
Reached out.
And this was at Grace House or Leonard's, St. Leonard's?
It was at St. Leonard's. I was the director of volunteers for the whole.
Both. Explain
Grace
to
House.
us, for those that
Okay.
may not, about St.
For
Leonard's.
St. Leonard's is the ministries that ministers to formerly incarcerated men and women. And so it was a wonderful 8 years. I learned the African American community, the Latino community, and something about prisons. Very, very profound opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I worked with people who were interested in volunteering for this. So I interviewed them and tried to match their gifts with our needs.
Mm-hmm. Now, the men who came there right from prison, I know not everybody comes. They have to go through an interview process.
Yes.
And then they leave, right? I mean, they're able to go out on their own because this
Yes,
is a...
yes.
Mhm.
We would provide for them housing and programming, and they could, if they didn't have their high school education, there was a high school completion program. It was culinary arts, a building maintenance program. We taught them financial literacy. So, so we had a lot of volunteers who came in to help with those, some of those areas.
Did you have anything to do with Grace House?
Yes.
Where the women, incarcerated women
Yes,
who were
yes, yes. And besides the volunteers, I also tutored. I tutored over at Grace House in math, and I tutored in math
Great.
at. So I mean, I could see where the needs were, because people weren't ready to get in the high school yet. And so I tutored, and then eventually we always also had some college kids doing internships, so I taught them how to do the tutoring also.
Oh, that's great, college
So,
kids and that.
yeah, yeah, we had a lot of college
In
kids.
the environment. You know, when you went and had the interview with Bob, and you probably went through Leonard House, was that part of the interview?
Yes.
Was there an experience in there? Did you meet anyone, one of the residents maybe that you encountered, that you spoke with, that maybe helped make the decision that you thought, yeah, I think I could be here?
Well, you know, Grace and Kathy were with me. And I think it was, and Kathy had had that job before me.
Okay.
But she had to retire.
Right.
And so the reaction and the reception of Grace and Kathy being on campus was just remarkable. The guys welcomed them, and you could tell they really loved Kathy. And I just felt very welcomed.
You felt it and you knew
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
in your 8 years there, did you have an experience? Can you recall an experience that had a profound, effect on you? One or a couple things that.
Oh, lots. You know, I worked with one, there was a fellow who had been in prison. He had come to this country from Cuba when he was 16. He had never learned to read English. He wanted to learn to read English. And I worked with him. And just to see him, because, you know, he had been in prison a long time. And for him to be able to read, to go get his ID card, to be able to do all the things he was going to have to do, it was a remarkable experience. And to hear his story of coming and getting in with the wrong people.
Oh, I know. And as you meet the individuals there, it's just got to stop you in your tracks.
It
And
really is.
Look at your life experience and look at what they have or haven't had.
You know, when I was taking the position, my brother-in-law said to me, "Oh, Sharon, don't let yourself be alone with those guys." Well, I said to my brother-in-law, the first time I visited with him, I said, you know, I never feel as safe in the city of Chicago as I feel on that campus. 40 guys have my back.
That's true.
And my brother-in-law became one of the great supporters. He would send all kinds of tools for our building maintenance, and he just realized what a difference it made in my life, and it changed his whole view of people coming out of prison.
You spoke earlier about the gentleman that wanted to learn how to read, never had the education to be able to read, that's a great gift to.
And he could read in his own in Spanish, but he couldn't read in English.
Got it. Yeah, right. There must have been other men there who had various issues and addictions, or was that all taken care of before they even got there? Because
no, that's what I mean. You know, there was a thorough screening program, and the people who came to us were the people who were ready to make a change. I remember saying to one of the gentlemen, because we had AA and NA, Alcoholics Anonymous and narcotics, and I was talking to one young man, and he had been in prison like 15 years, and he was talking to a group about his addiction. And I said, but you haven't had anything to drink for 15 years. He said, that doesn't mean.
No.
He said, I'm a dry drunk.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean that I've recovered. So, I mean, not only the programming, but it was what I learned from the participants over the years was incredible.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? when
It
you
really does. It
think
was.
about-
It had really a profound experience.
And we need to continue to be present to the population that needs some
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
support and mentoring, as we have had the mentoring. Presently, you're at the hospital in Henderson.
Yes.
Could you just explain a little bit about what your present ministry is? Why did you leave Chicago? Or what prompted you to leave Chicago?
Well, I had retired from that job. Bob had moved on,
Right.
and we were on the second, and they wanted to expand opportunities for. A lot of our volunteers were older people and retired people and college kids, but they wanted to reach out to the people who were connected in jobs, so that maybe we could tap into, because they worked hard to get their funding, and they wanted more things in the evening. And I already did Sunday evenings and Tuesday evenings, and I thought, I can't do any more at this point. Especially, I had a 10-mile drive to work, and in the wintertime. I didn't mind in the summer, but in the wintertime when it gets dark early. And so I said, it's time. You need a younger person doing this, who can do this. So I retired.
Wise decision. Was that one of your easier decisions as you look back on your life?
Yeah, that was easier. That was easier. I knew it was the right moment, and it was. I was living at St. Denis in Chicago, and some of the older sisters were coming in here, and so it was time. I spent that summer helping begin to close up shop at St. Denis.
And then you made the decision to go to Henderson.
Yes,
and
I
be with Phil.
was invited by Phyllis.
Phyllis, good.
I
So are you retired out there? Are you relaxing?
when we got there, Phyllis said to me, "Now just take a month and just relax." After 2 weeks, I said, "Okay." She came home one day, and I had washed all the windows outside and inside. And she said, I said, "Okay, I'm ready." So I went over and met the volunteer director and said, "I'd like to volunteer." So I took their little training program, and I volunteer at the front desk.
That's good.
And it's wonderful because I'm every time I'm there, I learn something new.
And it's less responsibility. There is something about, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, you're responsible, but it's different after you
When-
say I'm retired.
When I went in, the volunteers wear white and a little purple jacket, and it says volunteer. And so when I was meeting the other volunteers, they said, and mine said Sister Sharon, and they said, "Well, now, are you here to take Sister Michael Thomas's place?"
there.
And I said, "No one can take her place." Well,
That's
they all
right.
laughed.
That's right.
And but it's been a wonderful experience. I enjoy it.
Good.
I really enjoy it.
How has it been for you to, I know you've reflected, I gave you some questions, I don't think I used any of them, but anyway, how has it been for you to relive, briefly, we only have a few minutes left,
Yes.
to relive your story? And if you told it again tomorrow, it would be totally different, somewhat different. Yeah, but
yeah,
how has it been to relive all your decisions and your ministries? And you've been around the block a few times.
I've been around the block,
Yeah.
and I think I look back and I think, sometimes I think, where did you get the courage to do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the hardest decision was leaving the monastery.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not a young person.
Mm-hmm. What a risk.
And of course, when I was in that process, I first had to make the decision to leave. And that decision did not rest on whether or not I could transfer to Adrian's.
Got it.
Because I knew my friends at the Montessori school would give me a job in a minute. But so, yeah, I look back and I think, wow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the people that I've met in my life, and it's the questions and not being afraid to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And to live with those questions until you live into a new place.
And be comfortable with that decision.
Absolutely.
Irregardless of what
Yes.
might be,
Yes,
what I perceive others might be thinking.
right,
That's a risk.
right. So it's been a wonderful life.
Mm-hmm.
And I living in the valley
Yeah.
out in Nevada and seeing the Black Mountains around and a desert landscape.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Good, good. Okay, well, we have to say thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your life with us. Thank you for coming to us and how all those things happen. Only God truly knows.
Only God
And
truly
you have to
knows.
listen.
That's
And
right.
You did listen. And
That's
so, the congregation thanks you, blesses you for your ministry among us and what you're doing out there at our hospitals.
And
Yeah.
it's been wonderful.
Good. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
And safe travels back home.
Thank you.